Cardell, that's C-A-R-D-E-L. Let me just take this down and throw this up here. And there's not the greatest, a lot of these books we have Xerox. This book now is available, though, I believe, on Amazon and a lot of other places. It didn't come out that long ago. Cardell's another socialist Jew from Germany. And he makes the point that after 2,000 of years of certain Jews trying to get back to Israel, Hitler comes along, and 3 years after he disappears from the world scene, Israel's founded. And he makes the point that when you look at this whole thing, that Hitler was very instrumental, whatever Hitler's intentions were, in the founding of Israel. This book is full of stuff. A lot of it, I don't consider this book to be as rock solid in documentation by any means as some of the others that I'm mentioning here, but it's a lot of anecdotal stuff, and it is worth perusing. It's got some very interesting insights. Here's the way he begins this off, this Cardell. He says, in 1973, on an Atlantic island, the author ran across a staff officer with whom, and together with other men from a dozen European nations, he besieged Leningrad some 30 years earlier. This was 1973. At the outbreak of the First World War, his parents, Jews of Vienna, while on an oceanic voyage, were impounded and later settled on this island. After the first few drinks in a casino, having loosened their tongues, the author, that's Cardell, asked him, quote, "Amigo, being a full Jew, how can you wear these 3 medals and decorations with a swastika on your chest?" End quote. "Well," came back the answer in a beautiful Viennese jargon, "why don't you start scratching on Hitler yourself? Then you will see that a Vienna Jew like me will appear." Unquote. And he goes on from there. He has a lot of interesting things in this book. Let me go to a picture here, though, at that juncture, because he says this particular guy quoted. A lot of the stuff in this book, though, is anecdotal, but I think it's worth noting, and that Cardell's still alive and passionately defends his book from what I understand. Here's a picture of Hitler before he became Chancellor shaking the hands of Hindenburg, who was the previous head of Germany before Hitler. This is not a proof, but I see here this picture's famous. You can get it on the internet by going to google.com images and put in Hitler Hindenburg. I see here a body type that is definitely a Prussian man in Hindenburg. And over here, I might imagine that I see a little Sephardic Jew type of a person shaking hands with him. This is not a proof. Of course, some people said Hitler's mustache was to blunt the Jewish type nose that he had from being as prominent. These are not proofs, but I just present this picture to you. Otto Strasser, a rival of Hitler, who we'll get into later, said that Hitler was always very obsequious around Hindenburg when he was trying to, hoping to succeed him. So again, that isn't a proof, it's more of an anecdotal thing. But now, one of the other things that is in this book, and he quotes a number of anecdotes about it, is the idea that he quotes a Trebek Lincoln, a Jewish fellow who brought money to Hitler, he says at certain points, as saying, anti-Semitism is only valuable in the hands of us Jews. Now, he then documents that many of the anti-Semitic papers in Europe were managed by Jews, and that anti-Semitism was used as a tool to advance the Jewish agenda. That's what Jensen in the book Hitler's Policy is a Jewish Policy was saying, and Trebek Lincoln says that. Now, Israel Shahak says the same thing in his book Jewish History, Jewish Religion. Now, modern day example, does anybody remember about 30 years ago, I think it was the 70s, there was a march by the Nazis through Skokie, Illinois. That made national news. Almost everybody my age remembers it. Suddenly there was Nazis marching in Skokie, Illinois, national headlines, and oh my gosh, anti-Semitism is back. What came out a little while later, that the guy who led the Nazi party in that march and in the Skokie, Illinois Nazi Fuhrer was a guy named Collins, who himself was Jewish. In other words, the head of the whole Nazi march through Skokie, Illinois, was Jewish. He was later convicted of a child molesting. I don't know whether that was a setup to make the Nazis look, Nazis look bad as they should look bad. But my point is what I thought when I saw that, I thought, what is going on here? Well, as Ratisbonne says, we thought that all socialism was of Jewish origin except Nazism, National Socialists. And by the time you get done looking at all this research, I think we can conclude that all socialism was of a Jewish source in the 20th century. Now, in a minute, we're going to finish this section off by reading from The Jewish Connection, a book put out in the last few decades, probably about 1970s, by M. Hirsch Goldberg, which is just a lot of fun facts about the Jewish connection to things and the Jewish connection to Hitler in this book. But before that, I have got to go back to read, as we're going through here, something has occurred to me, I forgot to read two important things. The first thing is about, remember the Bridget Heyman book, Hitler's Vienna, came out in 1999. Listen to this. Hitler had this straight... What do we make of this? If the man's not trying to hide something, what do we make of this? I mean, Hitler's an intelligent guy, detail-oriented, and all that kind of stuff. She quotes on page 48, Hitler did not want to hear anything about relatives. I've got no idea about family history. She's quoting him here, according to one source at the William Patrick interview when Hitler and William Patrick, the nephew from Ireland, met. In that area, I'm an absolute dunce. Even when I was younger, I didn't know I had relatives. I've only learned that since I became Rights Chancellor. This reminds me of Madeleine Albright saying she just found out she was Jewish when she became Secretary of State. Can you imagine that? A family with survivors, Holocaust survivors, not mentioning it to her till she's Secretary of State. But he says, again to repeat, I've only learned that I have relatives since I became Rights Chancellor. I am an entirely non-familial being, a non-clanning being by nature. That's not my cup of tea. I only belong to my folkish community. And then on page 51, she quotes, going to this interview where he invited William Patrick Hitler to come see him when he was threatening to blackmail him. When Hitler became famous, his poor Irish relatives, whom he did not know, saw their chance to make money and gave interviews to newspapers in England as Hitler's relatives. Subsequently, in 1930, now this is before he came to power, Hitler had 19-year-old Patrick, whom he had never met before, visit him in Munich, where he told him and his half-brother Aloy that he forbade them to do things like that, give interviews about the family. He is supposed to have said that the family should not believe they could become famous at his expense. They're quoting him here from a report of the meeting, I guess from William Patrick Hitler. Quote, although she makes it clear in here, she gives a source if you read it, if you go to the book and so forth. It's footnote 215, but she says, quote, you're going to do me in, Hitler is talking to William Patrick Hitler. Now again, what do we make of this from a grown man when I'm about to read? You're going to do me in. How carefully I have always kept my private life and my personal affairs from the press. People must not know who I am. They must not know where I'm from and who my family is. Not even in my book did I allow one word to come out about these things. Not one word, Mein Kampf in other words, not one word about his family. And then all of a sudden there's a nephew. They will start investigating. They will stick snoopers on the tracks of our past, unquote. In a newspaper interview in 1939, Patrick Hitler even said that his uncle had started sobbing and in his anger shed tears. Again, the great theatricist. What do we make of such talk? I'm asking you, the person watching this tape. So that's from Hitler's Vienna. Then we have, again, something from the Franz Jetzinger book that was written in the 30s. Again, going back to the Hans Frank interview, the pamphlet In the Face of the Gallows, Hitler's half-Jewish lawyer who was killed at Nuremberg. And this paragraph